Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us on Wandering Minds, live from Appleton North High School in Appleton, Wisconsin. Co-producers Andrew Ida and Emma Hammond. Narrated by Mr. Eric Eastman. Wandering Minds to us means exploring our thoughts, exploring the world around us. In recognition of January being Mental Wellness Month, today's podcast will be focusing on coping with mental illness, mindfulness, and always remembering that it gets better.
Welcome to our second official podcast. It's a little weird getting used to the old microphone on the mouth because I'm a bit of a heavy breather, so he has to edit all the breathy words that I use. Cool whip. Mental wellness. So we'll get started here. I can't wait to hear the bloopers. We are going to get started here. For those of you that don't know, January is Mental Wellness Month. Not Mental Illness Month. Mental Wellness Month. And we emphasize all of the positive aspects of who we are, what we experience, what we've overcome. And what I want to talk about today is I want to talk about how I've taken my struggles with mental health issues, and I've used them in just about every possible way that I could use them. It's far from perfect. You know, you still have bad moments, but I've learned to embrace some of the issues that I've gone through and use these things to do good. And frankly, I just want everybody to always know that it gets better. It gets better. It does. I am a walking, talking, obnoxious testimony to it getting better. Most of you know that I have obsessive compulsive disorder. I have had it since I was in 7th, 8th grade. No idea where it came from. Some doctors would like to say my parents caused it. No, just kidding. Mom, if you're listening, that's not true. We know that. It's not true. I got really sick in 7th grade. I got really, really ill, and I was actually hospitalized physically with something called gastroenteritis, and I lost 25 pounds, and I was out for about, it was almost 2 weeks. I was out of school, and I was hospitalized for about 5 days, and it was really scary, and I don't know if that experience made me fear getting sick, but about 6 months to 9 months later is when some of the obsessive compulsive rituals and thoughts kind of manifested themselves. And so imagine how brutal 8th grade is to begin with. Okay? I mean, it's like awful. It's like Dante's 8th ring of hell. Okay? With all the changes your body's going through, okay, and all these worries that you have about fitting in, and all of a sudden your face is breaking out and you're growing hair places where you've never had hair before, and all this crazy stuff is going on. And then you go ahead and throw in there these crazy thoughts. OCD has both obsessions and compulsions. Obsessions are going to be the uncontrollable recurring thoughts, the thoughts that just go through your head over and over and over again. And there's usually several different themes that they involve. Number one is germs, and that was the big one for me. It wasn't the only one, but that was the big one. Believing that it may have come from how sick I was in 7th grade, who knows, whatever. There's also unwanted thoughts related to sex, religion, and harm. Those are sort of the morality obsessions that people have. And I had some of those, but those were not nearly as powerful as the germ obsessions. Then there's also the aggressive thoughts of harming yourself or harming others. This is an example that I give. Okay, and some people can understand this. You're driving across College Avenue Bridge, and you think, what would happen if I yanked the steering wheel? Has anybody ever thought of that before? Raise your hand if you've ever had some sort of... Okay, so we have about 50% of people raise their hands. Now think about if you had that thought and you actually think you were going to do it. Not that you were going to do it, but you think you were going to do it. And it was recurring over and over again. That's those feelings of aggressiveness towards yourself or towards others. It's something that you would never do, but it's a thought that just overwhelms your mind. Okay? Some people with OCD, they have thoughts of harming their loved ones, even though they would never do it. They just can't stop thinking about possibly doing it. And then the final one, and all of us have some of these things, but having things symmetrical and orderly, is if anybody's ever been in my classroom, you know I don't have that one. My classroom is a colossal, like, tornado zone, right? Okay, it's like Oklahoma in the spring. So anyway, those are some of the obsessions. Some of the compulsions. Okay, so the obsessions are the thoughts. The compulsions are the actions. My biggest, well, not my biggest, but one of my compulsions was hand washing. Another big compulsion is cleaning. Okay, cleaning and hand washing. My big one was hand washing. And just to put it in perspective, just washing your hands several times after you go to the bathroom does not OCD make. You would get into these rituals where I would wash my hands 300-400 times a day. Yes, to the point where my hands were not just raw, but they were bleeding. And lotion wasn't going to do a whole lot for it. That's one compulsion. That was one of the big ones. I actually showed all of these compulsions. But the second one, ordering and arranging things in a particular order. You know, having your notebooks neat and orderly, that sort of thing, which, again, is a habit that many people have. But it's when it consumes you on a minute-by-minute basis. The third is repeatedly checking on things. I mentioned this in a previous presentation. Checking your alarm clock. You check it more than once sometimes, don't you? Okay, maybe twice, maybe 3 times. Okay, I would go through the house, and I would, of course, check my alarm clock, but I would check to make sure the doors were locked. And worrying about the door not being locked is one thing, but I would go to each one of the doors, and I would go to the doors, and I would check them repeatedly. And then I would incorporate the fourth compulsion, which is counting. And so I would go to a door lock, and I would take the door lock, and I would flip it back and forth. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, it's locked. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, it's locked. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, it's locked. And then I would walk away, and I'd be like, is it locked? And I would go right back, and I'd have to do the same thing over again. So this would be a 45-minute process to just make sure all the doors were locked. Okay? So that's enough about the bad stuff. These were the thoughts that consumed me for all consuming for about a year and a half. During this entire time, nobody knew I had OCD. Okay? My mom started to get an inkling that something was going on after about 9 months to a year, and it wasn't because she wasn't a caring mom. It was that I did one hell of a good job of hiding it. None of my friends knew. I never missed school. I got a 4.0. Okay? I played 6 different sports. Okay, not at the same time. That would be rather remarkable. But I played 6 different sports over the course of the year. I was successful at those sports. I was successful at school. And nobody knew what was going on. Ultimately, over the course of my life, I have had a tremendous opportunity to have lots of people involved in getting better. And so now for the remainder of the time, I want to talk about the benefits of what I experienced and what I went through. So let's talk about the therapy. Therapy involves, in my case, involved 2 different things. It involved changing the way I thought and changing the way I acted. It's called cognitive behavior therapy. Change the way you think, change the way you act. Which wasn't a super simple process. It wasn't something that happened overnight. But it was something that became somewhat competitive for me. You see, part of the issue with people with OCD is they're oftentimes very perfectionistic. And they like things to be perfect, and they want to be perfect, and they want everything perfect. So I took that OCD, and I said, you know what? I'm going to use it in a positive way. I'm going to stop this stuff. I'm going to stop it real fast. Well, it didn't happen as fast as I wanted it to, but I used some of my personality to embrace tackling some of my issues. I was a perfectionist. That wasn't going to change. So let's use that and try to be as good as I can at conquering this stupid mental health issue that I'm dealing with. And I attacked it head on. And it was good. It got better. I changed not necessarily my personality, but I changed the way I thought about things. I changed the way I approached things. And I became a little more logical in my reasoning. And the second component of that is behavior. And what that is, I slowly but surely attempted to eliminate some of the rituals. And as I was eliminating those rituals, what I would do is as I eliminated one of the rituals partially, I would reinforce myself by giving myself an opportunity to do something fun. Play with the dog, shoot baskets, whatever. So instead of feeling anxious about not doing a ritual, I would do something fun. And all of a sudden, when those rituals would pop into my mind, instead of going towards anxiety and fear, it would shift towards wanting to do something fun. So I worked my way towards that. And believe me, I'm talking like it's a super fast process. It was not like an immediate process. I don't want it to sound like that. But over time, it got better and better. Now, over the course of my last 25 years or so, I want to talk a little bit about the positive aspect of my mental health. I can't change the fact that I have OCD. I can't change the fact that I have bouts of agoraphobia, that I've had bouts of anxiety, generalized anxiety. Okay? I can't change the fact that I've had panic attacks. I can't change the fact that I've had bouts of depression. But what I have been able to do is I've been able to take those characteristics and I've been able to use those in a positive way. Prior to developing OCD, and even in the early years of having OCD, I wasn't always the greatest person in the world. I held grudges. I placed a tremendous amount of guilt on people that I thought wronged me. I was not very compassionate. I was not very empathetic. But as I started to come to grips with some of the mental health issues that I had, I realized that some of my obsessive thoughts were shifting. And they were shifting towards being more empathetic, where an obsessive thought wouldn't be about me and me getting sick. It would be possibly about me wronging somebody, me doing something that was mean to somebody else. I would start obsessing about how somebody else felt. I would be in a grocery store and I would see a child with special needs, And I all of a sudden would start thinking about what they were thinking. And all of a sudden, some of these tendencies that were always driven towards me, were starting to shift towards others. And it wasn't to the point where I was obsessing over and over and over again and I had to do these rituals. I was just taking something that had previously been rather harmful, dysfunctional, maladaptive, and all of a sudden I was changing these characteristics into using it towards care, towards caring for others, towards being empathetic, which was highly beneficial. I also became incredibly conscientious. I mentioned that I was also a perfectionist, still am in a lot of ways. And all of these traits, all of these characteristics, many of you have me in class. Some of you that don't have me in class, I've talked with you many, many times. I'd like to think that I'm a caring teacher and that I'm dedicated to my job and that I'm as prepared as I can possibly be, sometimes not as focused, right? Especially 8th hour on a Friday. No, never. We're locked in, free will versus determinism. But these traits that were always so negative, all of a sudden, I realized that these same traits were the ones that kind of made me who I am. Now listen, notice I've never said that mental health or mental illness defined me. You know, when you go through this, sometimes you get wrapped up and you like, I have depression or I have anxiety or I have OCD, and that's who I am, right? And sometimes that can be really tough to overcome. What I needed to realize is that was part of who I was, but that didn't define me. That was just a small part of who I was. There was a lot more to me than just my OCD. I wouldn't change a thing. And it's tough for me to say sometimes because I still have some rituals. You can ask my wife, checking my pulse, making sure that my heart's okay, getting caught up in a fear of possibly having a panic attack when I'm standing in front of a large group of students giving a presentation. Those things can still hit me. But most of the time I'm all right with it because I wouldn't have done half of the things I've been able to do in my career and in my personal life without having the experiences that I've had. That's been hugely beneficial, and I've had to grasp onto that. I've had to hang on to that. I don't concern myself with the stigma of having mental health issues, just as somebody with diabetes shouldn't be concerned with the stigma of being a diabetic. It's just a small part of who I am. And that's like the best thing that I've experienced from this, is that it's a small part of who I am, and it's helped to make me as good a teacher, as good a husband as I could be. And I've learned to embrace that. I would love to answer any questions related to anything that you're interested in, but of course I'd be happy to talk about ways that I have approached my mental health, ways that I've dealt with stigma, ways that I've improved. Any questions that you might have, none too personal. I am an open book.
If you're like treating someone with OCD and they're like in the middle of like one of the rituals, would you just let them complete it or stop them?
What a great question. Okay, so I have not addressed what people should do around others with mental health issues. So what should you do if somebody's in the middle of an OCD ritual? It's like a sleepwalker. Let them finish. Let them finish. Because if they don't finish, it's just going to create all that much more anxiety. Just like a sleepwalker, you don't try to wake a sleepwalker up because they're going to freak out. Many of us, if I were to ask for, how many of you know somebody with a mental health issue? Okay, most of the hands go up. Okay, most people know somebody with a mental health issue. One of the biggest strains on people with mental health issues is the angst that they believe that they place on loved ones around them. So I felt guilt about my parents having to deal with my OCD. So if they acted upset, angry, I just want to fix you. that made it worse. That made it a lot worse. Now, if a person is in the midst of a break where you're afraid that they're suicidal, there has to be intervention. There's no question about that. But you all are not therapists. You all are friends, your sisters, your brothers, your sons, your daughters. The desire to want to fix somebody is so innately driven in all of us that we think that we can fix everything. What that does is that places more pressure on the person with a mental health issue. Because now they're trying to get better for you, or excuse me, they're trying to get better for themselves, and they're trying to get better for everybody else around them. And that's a tremendous amount of pressure, especially when you are thinking so completely irrationally. It kind of exacerbates the issue. And the greatest thing you can do is just simply embrace the person for who they are, and recognize that what they're struggling with is not the definition of who they are. Okay, next question.
So you mentioned that you were very good at hiding this from people. When you thought that somebody was about to find out or discover that you were struggling with OCD, what kind of went through your head? Was it kind of more panic or like relief, despite the fact that you kept trying to hide it?
Yeah, when I was in junior high and high school, it would be a tremendous amount of panic. So a couple things that people with OCD do. Number one, they avoid situations where a lot of anxiety and a lot of possible OCD rituals would be kicked into place. They're going to attempt to avoid those things. But when they can't avoid them and all of a sudden they feel a ritual coming, a lot of times you'll try to escape. And you'll try to escape so somebody doesn't find out. So a lot of times I'd be getting up in the middle of class and going to the bathroom or whatever to try to avoid having an episode that would occur in front of other people. So it would be a tremendous amount of panic. In contrast to that, now I think the thing that, as I've matured, as I've gotten much older, I've realized that by embracing the OCD and sharing with it, the more I share it, the more comfortable I am with it. And the less likely I am to panic and have a tremendous amount of anxiety related to it. But that took time. But I'll tell you what, it was well worth it, because now I can share with so many people that, it gets better, Next.
How were you diagnosed with OCD?
Okay. I remember the moment, flashbulb memory. I remember the moment well. My mom was in the hospital. People that are afraid of germs, hospitals are not good places. My mom was in the hospital for a hysterectomy. And this is when I was in 8th grade. And I had OCD symptoms for quite a while before that. But when I had to go to the hospital, and I had to go to the hospital to visit her, there was about 8 million things running through my mind. The fear of germs, the fear of getting sick, the fear of dying, but then the tremendous amount of guilt I was feeling about not wanting to be by my mom, not wanting to be in the hospital, wanting to escape that place. So it simply wasn't just about my rituals, but it was also about the guilt I was feeling, about not wanting to be by my mom who needed me, and I loved her and that sort of thing, but the OCD was so overpowering that I couldn't concentrate and I was racing thoughts. And then when I went home, I had one of those, maybe some of you have experienced it before, where I just froze. I got home and I froze, and it was the worst thing that ever happened to me, and it was the best thing that ever happened to me, because I could no longer control the anxiety, the obsessions, and the compulsions anymore, and I lost it. And thank goodness my dad recognized it at the time, and talked to my mom, and they're like, you need to go see somebody. And after the first session of seeing somebody, everything wasn't better, but all of a sudden I realized that other people were experiencing the same things that I'd experienced. So all of a sudden I realized I wasn't as alone as I thought I was. That was the breaking point. It took me to completely lose control, because I was, and still am, an absolute total control freak. And I wanted to control everything. And at that moment, I had lost all control. And like I said, it was the most horrific feeling in the world, and it ultimately ended up being the best thing that could have happened to me, because I had to get help. And then all of a sudden I realized I wasn't alone.
What kind of effect do you think social pressures have on the anxiety which caused these problems.
When you're dealing with various anxieties, depression, those types of things, I think it's going to be, in many cases, it's going to vary, but it's going to be a combination of nature and nurture. I believe I was genetically predisposed to OCD. My uncle showed signs. My sister showed signs. It was definitely somewhat predisposed. My personality led me towards obsessive thoughts, perfectionism, that sort of thing. The environment in which I placed myself in, highly demanding, basketball, baseball, soccer, academics, all of those things fostered that. I was around other people that were competitive. It definitely plays a role. There are other mental health issues that I think are very much driven by environment and social drives, such as body issues, eating disorders, that sort of thing. So I do believe that there's definitely a social/environmental component to it.
All right, that's all we have for today. Just remember, we don't care what you think, just as long as you keep on thinking. Thanks for listening.